again, I just want to give the warm greeting. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today for our live webinar. Today is October 19th, and our course will be on Website Content Governance 101, a crash course for marketers and communicators. So really excited to jump into this webinar here today. Just a few quick housekeeping rules that we do like to go over. I shouldn't say rules, just a quick housekeeping things to note here is that please feel free to use the live transcription from Zoom. We do offer that, so if that is something that you'd like to utilize, please do so. The recording will have closed captionings, and just know that we'll send the recording and the slides after the session. Just give us a little bit of time. We do like to edit those captions so that we make sure that they are as on point as possible for you, as well as making sure that the slides have alt text and all of the great stuff that we know will make it accessible for all. And then in addition, we encourage questions of all kinds, so please put them in the questions panel and we will take them at the end of the session. We also know that some of you were great and sent in some questions preemptively, and we absolutely love that. So thank you for pre-submitting your questions. We will try to get to all of them, but please rest assured if we do not do so today, we will follow up with a Q&A after the webinar, and that will be included in our follow-up email. So we'll get to those for you. And then for today's speakers, you have myself. I am the host presenter. My name is Ashley Hefner. Hi, everyone. I'm the marketing coordinator here at Monsido, powered by Civic Plus. And I'm going to hand the mic on over to my colleague to introduce herself.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ashley. Hello, everyone. My name is Jasmine de Guzman. I am the Director of International Marketing here at Monsido, powered by Civic Plus. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Monsido, I do just want to give a quick introduction to us as well. We offer a platform that scans your website and helps you identify different website content errors, accessibility, website performance, and so on. So if you're not familiar with us, just a little intro to what we do. A little bit quickly about myself. I've been working in the website space for the past 7 years. So really familiar with this as a topic and really excited to share some thoughts around website content governance with you today. And I myself have worked as a website manager kind of in a larger organization. So I know the struggles of maintaining a website. So really glad to be here today, share some tips and tricks, and also, of course, encourage you guys to share your knowledge and your tips and tricks as well in the chat as we go along. So if there's anything that we've missed that you guys feel is really successful in your organization, please do let us know. And that's it for me for now.
All right, thanks so much, Jasmine, for that fantastic introduction. And then just to go over the agenda, so what you can expect to hear from us today. First thing we're going to cover is why your website is still a vital digital asset to your organization. Next, we will talk about common website content issues and how to really fix them. Next, we will talk about enabling better team collaboration on your website, because we know that often it's multiple hands that are touching a website. So team collaboration and making sure everyone's on the same page is just as vital. So we're going to go over some tips for that, as well as a couple of real life examples. And then at the end, one of my favorite parts is the Q&A, when we get to interact with you guys and answer some of your questions that you have prior to the webinar, as well as any that you get during. All right, and then as always, if you have joined some of our webinars in the past, you know that we like to kick it off with a quick pulse check, just to kind of get everyone's gears turning here. So I'd like to ask, what's your biggest challenge in managing your website content? Number one, it may be a lack of time and resources. Number two, it may be content contributors not following guidelines. And number three, it could be outdated technology, which I know we have all worked at an organization before where that has been a hindrance, whether it's in the website or maybe in any type of other resource that you're using. And if there's anything other, we encourage you to drop it in the chat and just let us know. We're here to learn from you as well. We'll give it just about a little bit. I see that we have over 60% of people who are voted, so that's so great. Thank you so much for submitting your answers, everyone. We do love to take a look at these. So we'll give it about 5 more seconds here, and then we will show the results.
There is not an all of the above option, but you're welcome to comment that in the chat if it is all of the above. Well, I'll end the poll now then and share the results for you, Ashley.
Thank you so much. All right, so we can see that 49% of you said that it's a lack of time and resources, which I mean, we can all understand, right? A lot of the times, one person is wearing multiple hats within their organization, and it's a lot to juggle. And also, having the resources to be able to streamline and manage your website's content can be very difficult. And then, content contributors not following guidelines, I see that 37% of you submitted that as an answer. Outdated technology, we got 13% of you, and then others, there were 2%. And I like to look in the chat here and see that some people were interested in, all of the above. And then some people were saying it's also a lack of awareness, which hopefully you will learn something here today to help you be just a little bit more aware or have a tips and trick to, take back to your organization and kind of be the content champion.
Right, just closed out the results for you. There you go.
For your votes there. And now to kind of dive into the meat and potatoes of the agenda that we had discussed. So one of the things we want to talk about is your website and its content. We all have heard the saying, content is key. And we want to talk about why having your website, up to date and having the content be, correct is still a vital digital asset for your organization. So here's why your website is still a vital digital asset for your organization. So when it comes to finding information out about an organization or a government resource, there are multiple different ways of which you could find this information, but three key ones really stood out and come top of mind to me. Number one is the good old search engine. Most of us, we are looking for some quick information about, maybe our local recreation park or our post office or so many different things. And the first thing we're going to do is pop it into the good old Google search. And from there, from Google, you'll typically end up clicking on the landing page, right? Social media profiles. I know I love to try new restaurants and I love to go when I'm traveling. I love to check out new places. And a lot of that is driven for me from social media profiles. So I will look at the social media profile and then I will click the link that is in the bio, and that'll ultimately drive me to the landing page where I will get information about the place that I saw on Instagram or TikTok that I really want to check out, as well as your local newspaper. The newspaper, will give you a limited amount of information, and from there you're often going to want to just, look it up and figure out more rather than just read the small script within the newspaper. And with that being said, here is why we wanted to talk about why your website is so important, because this has happened to many of us, I'm sure, before. What about when this happens? What about when you go to look up the library and it says that it's permanently closed? What do you do then? Do you trust it? Do you not go to the library? I mean, what if you've driven by it before and you've seen people and now this is saying this? Do you trust that the hours are up to date? Typically, what's going to happen from there is you will click on the website to get more information. Also, you can see here to the right, we pulled up a Twitter example of a list of and map of the first 144 post offices that would lose their carrier operations under DJOI's DFA plan. So these offices will be at risk of staff cuts, postmaster downgrades, reduced hour, relocation, and closure. Now, this is a tweet with a lot of information in it, right? So from there, in order to process this information, you're probably going to click on that spreadsheet and then click on your local one and go to the website to get more information about it, to see what you can trust, what you can believe, and what's correct. So from there, you can see why your website is your digital data hub and why it's so important that all of the information is up to date, it's correct, and how no matter what, people will be driven to your landing page through social media, through Google business listing, map results, and search results. For example, if you are planning your kid's birthday party, many people will do it at the park, which I don't blame them because you don't want the mess at your house. But with that being said, you will look up the park's location and you'll click on it, and you're going to want to make sure that the hours are up to date, that all of the information is there, that you can see pictures of the park, as well as who do you contact to reserve that space if it's needed to have a reservation. And as I mentioned before with social media, right? If you see something that's on social media where you actually want to visit it, you're going to want to go to that website and trust that you can book tickets. I know I recently went to Seattle and I wanted to go to a museum there, and I entered through the social media profile on Instagram, but I ended up having to purchase the tickets through the website, and it was a very user-friendly experience. And from there, it made it easy for me to purchase the tickets and made it easy for me to trust that website and ultimately want to go and use that service. And so, with that being said, good website content equals trust and credibility for your organization and for your website. And here are just a few of reasons that come top of mind as to why. Many people will click on your website to get information about your organization, who you are, what do you do, and establish that you're the official information source. So, your website, they're looking and counting on it to be that one stop shop for information. One of the things that comes to mind next is opening hours. When can people get in touch with you? When are you open? When are you closed? Also for parks and recreation, right? Like when does it open? When does it close? Nobody wants to be trespassing. So very important to know that information, as well as with, examples like the post office or your local museum or library. Very important to know those hours because you don't want to get frustrated with that. And at the same point as knowing hours, it's very important to know location. Where can people find you? Other tips like parking. Me and Jasmine were actually talking before we got on here about how parking can be such a pain point. I know that I have a local post office near me, and the parking lot is very, very, very small. Therefore, maybe a mom with a kid who needs to take out their stroller, and street parking may not be the most accessible for them, or maybe they're going to want to go to a different post office, as well as what locations accept different things. I know FedEx, I've been to some FedEx locations, and they don't accept larger packages over 150 pounds. Something like that would be so vital to know on the website in regards to location, as well as parking and directions, because I know that I myself am not the most directionally savvy. So sometimes it helps, those little tips as to where you're located. And then in addition, products and services, which I think is ultimately very, very huge because most people are visiting your website because they want to utilize your product and service. And you, as an organization, you want them to utilize your product and your service because that's why you exist, to serve the people. So, what do you offer? For example, I'm not sure if many of you know this, but the post office, I'm sure actually many of you do, but the post office does passports, right? And with that, that is a product and service that they offer. However, how is it listed on the website? How can you easily find that? Is that a drop down where you can easily find that they offer that? Also, is it very clear about how they offer that? For example, if you do get your passport from the post office, you still need to get your picture done at CVS. They do not take the picture there. So it's just those little tips and tricks to know exactly what you're getting and what products and services they offer. And that way it's your one-stop shop and there's no pain points. When you go there, you know exactly what you're getting. You know exactly what the library's hours are. You know exactly what they offer. And that helps with trust and credibility. And then next is a clear call to action. So, how to get the products and services you offer. For example, do you need to make an appointment? What are the steps that you need to do? Because a lot of the times the user journey is about things being clear and concise. It really helps when you don't have to ask a lot of questions because it's all on the website. As you click your way through, it's an easy journey to get you from step A, B to C to exactly what you need to get done. And then last but not least, one of the things we thought about is contact information, which is very important. How to get in touch with you for any questions. And oftentimes it's also who to get in contact. I'm sure we've all had the frustration of calling someone and you get passed around to different landlines for just one thing that you're trying to get answered. So having clear contact information as to this is the park rec person who you reach out to for you know scheduling to have a birthday party there, or this is the website or this is who you reach out to for complaints or injuries or anything of that sort, as well as how to book appointments and who to really contact if you need to utilize that product and service. And often sometimes it can be an email, right? And help inbox that you want to have that information available and you want to have the phone numbers up to date and very clear so that people can reach out to you. And that ultimately really leads to that trust and credibility as well, because there's nothing more frustrating than going to a website, finding a phone number, and then you call it and it doesn't work anymore. That will certainly help make you lose a little bit of trust, because you're not going to leave the website and go digging for a phone number, right? That should have been your one-stop shop for that information. So your website content plays an important role in establishing credibility. And I hope by going through a few of these, you guys can see why that is.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ashley, for that wonderful introduction. And I think I identify with so many of those examples you gave of why your website content is such an important kind of self-service portal for your audience, whether it be your local community or potential customers. It's just so important that your website content is up to date. It's providing them what they need and making it really easy for them to engage with you, because yes, you might not be open, whether you're city hall or a bank or a small shop. You might not be open 24/7, but you know what is? Your website is open 24/7. And that's why your website and its content is so incredibly important. So I'm going to walk you through some of the common website content issues and how to proactively fix them. And I know some of these might seem very, very basic, but I think it's always good to take it back to basics. And we didn't call it Website Content Governance 101 for nothing. So if, again, like I mentioned at the start, if you have ideas of how you tackle this, please do feel free to share. We love making these collaborative and making it a knowledge sharing kind of community. So the first one that I wanted to talk about today is broken links and broken image links. And this is one of those things, as Ashley mentioned, if you go to a website and all there is a phone number and you try to call it, if you go to a website and you know exactly what you need and you're like, yes, this is a great website, I know they have exactly the information I'm looking for, and you go to click on that service and the link's broken, immediate frustration, right? Absolutely infuriating, because something that should take you 10 seconds to do is now probably going to either not be information that you get that you were looking for, or B, you're going to have to find it through another source, which may not be the official source. So I think that's another really important thing, is that broken links and also image links, which images also provide a lot of important context in certain situations as well, can cause a lot of frustration. So one of the things, and I meant to actually do this as a poll, but I forgot. So I'd love for you guys to contribute in the chat. But one of the things when I was working with websites was, how do we find broken links on our website? And so I'm wondering, how many of these different so-called solutions have you guys tried? Have any of you tried manually checking every link yourself? I'm not joking. We've had clients join us who've told us that that has been their process for checking for broken links, is that they've manually gone through every single site. Ask your team to randomly check different parts of your website. I know that's super popular as well. You'll send it out to everyone. Hey, we're launching a new section of our website. Can you just click through different random parts to see if there's any broken links? Ask your intern to test your links. And I see someone already commented that they've had someone ask their student intern to do this during their downtime, or all of the above maybe. And I can see someone else even collects the quirky screenshots for screenshots of the quirky 404 pages. I love that. That helps ease frustration. There are certainly a ton of those that do make you smile. I can see some people are using different broken link checkers, a variety of different, some people are using Monsido already. That's awesome. Some of you doing manual checks. Some of you have it built into your CMS. You guys have a ton of different, so a lot of different people using different broken link checkers. And that is absolutely fantastic. And some of you are using different website governance tools. Great. Well, fixing broken links and images, I think we probably come to the conclusion there are a couple of different things you need to do. First of all, of course, using a broken link checker, which is actually my last point, but we'll start from the bottom, is of course a great way to do it. It's very nice to either be able to run your website through a broken link checker and get that identified, or if you're using a website governance platform, you can get reports sent to you, for example. But a couple of other really great processes for broken links and images is ensuring that you set up 301 redirects for pages that you discontinue. And that is something that a lot of us don't necessarily think about. Okay, we're going to archive this page. We don't need it anymore. And that's often a big cause of broken links. So making sure that you're proactively redirecting any pages that you are archiving is just kind of good website hygiene and maintenance. And then the second kind of tip that we had for you guys as well was check pages as you publish them. It sounds so simple, and I know we're often all in a rush to get website content out the door as quickly as possible. I know we are in the Monsido marketing team as well. But one of the things that we're big advocates for is doing all of the checks as you publish them. Let's be honest, we're not going in and editing our web pages on a daily basis. We're not going in and making updates to most pages on a regular basis. A lot of the broken links and issues are typically there from the very beginning because you didn't check up on it to begin with. So that's also one of the other kind of big points. And there's a whole myriad of reasons to really focus on tackling broken links. From the fact that it can be a frustrating experience, and if it's linking to something like one of your calls to action, it can affect your revenue for your business, but it can also affect your brand. It can affect the overall user experience, but also in fact your Google ranking, right? Google is more and more trying to quantify the user experience of your website. So a little hint, when I share these slides later on, we have a whole blog post on it. So you'll see throughout the deck, I've put in little hints with lots more content for you guys to continue to build out. Awesome. Next topic, misspellings. And a few misspellings on your website, well, it could be okay, but there's nothing more frustrating than getting an email like this one. And I'm wondering, again, if one of you guys can raise your hands in the chat, I guess, how many of you have gotten an email from someone in your organization saying, I'm sorry, but this broken link is on your website, or there's this misspelling on this and this page. How did you not catch that? Is that not just the most frustrating and demotivating thing to ever get? I know I definitely felt like it because I took a lot of pride and joy in making sure that my website was a good representation of my organization. And so it's really frustrating when someone else notices a little mistake, like a misspelling on the website. And it feels a lot better when I'm able to find it myself. Okay, apparently nobody else can identify with that. Yes, okay, someone else. I'm not the only one. And of course, I always say thank you so much for letting us know, because it is great. I'd much rather let someone else. Okay, you got the broken link version, Lorena. Thanks for sharing, because I'm not the only one. So fixing and avoiding misspellings. These are a couple of my tips. And again, we have a little hint blog post, so maybe Ashley can share that as well with everyone. But a couple of different things that I think are really important to help avoid misspellings is don't write website content directly into your CMS. Not all CMSs have built-in spell checkers. So that's one of the big things where there's often a disconnect if someone goes in and starts typing content directly. So one of the things that I always encourage is that people should put their content into some kind of word processing document before, for example, Microsoft Word that has that spell check before uploading it. Another important thing, maybe just proofread your content. I know it's back to kind of the like grade school days, but read it aloud. That's often how you'll catch some of those things. Someone else is also recommending Grammarly as a great tool. Absolutely. That's a really nice thing. And it's a really good point because there are certain things that are or our. It's only one letter that's different, but it can have a whole new meaning. So no, it's not technically a misspelling, but it can make a really big impact on your website content and how people read it and understand it. So I see a couple of others advocating for Grammarly, so that's awesome. Having a screen reader read the content can also help you catch typos. I have not heard that before. That is a really great option. And people are also using a similar function in Word. Thanks to everyone for sharing that. I love that. Fantastic. All right, so on to the next one, readability. So I know if you've joined us for our webinars before, you know we talk a lot about readability. And the reason for this is it falls a little bit under this whole umbrella of making your website content accessible and inclusive. And the reason it falls under this umbrella is because the average US adult reads at an 8th grade reading level. And depending on who your audience is, that might not be a big deal. But if you really want to be inclusive to all, it's also about making sure that the language on your website is easy to understand, and it's quick for them to read. A couple of other things that I did want to highlight as well is that 20% of US residents over the age of 5 speak a language other than English at home. So we do have a lot of people in the United States. I don't know if some people are maybe joining from Canada, but we do have a lot of English as a second language residents. So I think it's also incredibly important to think about that depending on the information you're communicating. If you're, for example, working in a local government or in a local community and providing critical information and official information on your website, it's important that everyone understands what's going on. We just got a great stat from someone. Over 50% of Toronto residents are born outside of Canada. We need to make sure that exactly plain language is being used so that everybody understands. And in fact, there is a plain language act that has come into effect. I will look it up and put it in the follow-up as well. But it is also mandated. And then the other point is people don't read everything that's on your website. Let's be honest. We are often skimming websites to find the information we need. We're looking at headlines and then we're reading in detail. So I think it's also important to make sure that you're structuring your website for readability to make sure that people can quickly find what they need. Because I know all of you guys have a lack of time and you're definitely not the only one. So being able to get the information that you need as quickly as possible is important. So improving your content readability. Again, we got another hint in the bottom. I'm going to let Ashley share that with everyone. But some of the things that I think are really important is reducing your sentence length. As a native English speaker, I know we love really complex, long sentences, making sure that we're explaining everything in a way that makes sense to us, but really reducing our sentence length can make a really big difference. Again, catering your language to your audience. Know who your audience is. If you're living in Toronto and 50% of your residents are born outside of Canada, that's something you should keep in mind when you're working on your website content. Break up large chunks of content. As I mentioned before, a lot of us are skimming nowadays. So making sure that you have really good, clear headlines that help people quickly identify the content that they're looking for is really important. And then last but not least, there's a ton of tools out there to help you simplify your writing. I can see there's already some being shared. I was going to suggest the Hemingway app, which is a personal favorite of mine. I can see another one called Rewordify is also being shared in here. We'll make sure to go through this chat and share this with everyone. Could be incredibly important. I can see another great suggestion from someone is avoid idioms and euphemisms also helps keep content accessible. And I think that's another important point. It's again, going back to plain language, making sure you are using simple, easy to understand language. Fantastic. All right, so we're almost done. We've got 2 more to get through of things that I think are quite common that I wanted to discuss, and outdated or missing content. First of all, we know that anytime, and I think Ashley gave quite a lot of great examples in the beginning, your website is your official information source. If you do not have that official information, it will make you seem less credible and people will go elsewhere. It creates a very confusing experience for website visitor. I know this was something that was quite common during COVID, where people were forced to change opening hours a lot because of changing restrictions. And that created a very frustrating experience between what was being relayed digitally and versus what was happening in real life. But it also just creates an opening for misinformation if you're not posting the official information on your website. So that's why either outdated or missing content is something that you absolutely should address as part of your website content strategy. So how do you catch outdated content? It's hard, right? I know some of you have, I don't know, I want to say plus 10,000 pages, so it's not easy. And that's often why you have so many different collaborators working on there as well. But I think a couple of really good practices is doing quarterly audits of your website content, really looking at what content is being most used, because that's also where you have the biggest chance for mistakes, right? Also looking at what content has not been updated in a really long time and kind of re-verifying that. One of the other important things is keeping a log or some kind of a website map of where your important information is listed. I know we have moved offices in San Diego a couple of times. So for us, it's been really important to keep track of, oh, okay, where on our website is our address listed so that we can keep that updated. And then of course, don't forget PDFs. I think this is something that is very often overlooked, is you use an address in a PDF and it's not being updated. And someone's asking what would a log or map look like? It can be a spreadsheet. It can be a spreadsheet. It can be tagging different pages in certain ways, right? It's really up to your own personal preference. One of the other things that I also think is incredibly important that's overlooked is process updates. So if you update a process in your organization, for example, Ashley was mentioning that you actually go to the post office to get your passport done. And right now, a very important caveat of that process is that you need to get your photo taken at another place beforehand, like at a CVS. Let's say the post office changed the process and you could now get your photo taken at the post office. You need to make sure that you're updating the information around that process on your website too. So process update in your organization, make sure that if that process is somehow categorized or mentioned on your website, that process is being reflected, or that new process is reflected on your website. And then, of course, there's also tools out there. I know we have a tool, for example, that lets you search for outdated content based off of words or phrases. Of course, you can also always do the good old control find. Again, if you have an intern on downtime, they can always go through different pages and look for that. But there are also tools that crawl your entire website to help you find things like the mayor changed. So let's get his name updated across the entire website. All right, last but not least, I know I said we talk about website content, but I thought this was too important of a thing to overlook, to not talk about, because who cares if you have great website content if you have confusing navigation? And I can't tell you the amount of times I've seen websites with illogical menu titles that make more sense to you internally rather than your users. Another thing that's quite common is over cluttering your website navigation with too many menu items. I know that in a lot of large organizations, everyone wants to have their department or their call to action front and center on the website, but that's difficult. It'll become a sensory overload for the website user. And then last but not least, menus that don't work on mobile devices or assistive technology. I know so many of us today, we're accessing website and finding critical information through our phones. And when it's not working, or when a website doesn't work with, or like a menu doesn't work, it can be incredibly frustrating because then you can't even get to the content. So what are some of the things that you need to do? Use commonly recognized website menu items for your industry. So about us, right? Everyone knows there's typically an about us section on a website. Don't try to make it something fancy that will confuse people. Keep it really plain and simple so it's something that is very easily recognizable for people. Next is use data to prioritize what is featured on the front page. Digital marketing is a beautiful thing because you can actually measure it, right? So you can see what are your most visited pages. You can see what the most visited calls to action. You can see what the most downloaded PDFs are on your website, and use that data to your advantage. And to all of the departments who are screaming to have their content on the first page, use that to your advantage and say, I'm only putting the top 10 on the front page. And then of course, help users find what they're looking for as well by adding a search bar to your website. It is a very simple fix, but often lets people find much quicker what they're looking for, but is also a really interesting exercise for you as an organization because you can actually see a log of what people are searching and then use that to improve your website content. So if you have not thought of that before, there are two benefits to a search bar: helping your users find what they need and helping you improve your content. All right, that was a lot of talking for me. I'm just going to take a quick sip of water and then we're going to jump into how can we enable better team collaboration. All right. So the first thing that I want to highlight is I've talked to a lot of different website managers, and one thing that often is lacking is a website content strategy. So the first things first is, if you probably have a marketing strategy, you probably have a communication strategy, but do you have a website content strategy? And I think for me, it's really about making sure that you have um, consistency in everything you do. And if you do not yet have website guidelines or a content style guideline, don't be afraid to set standards. Having a content strategy is 99% making sure that you're consistent across the board, whether it be your website copy and content, the imagery, what type of videos are allowed to be put up there. So having a really strong guidelines will help you along the way. Next thing I've already a little bit mentioned, content data and performance. Know what your top pages are, know what your top blog posts are. Make sure you use that to your advantage when you're talking with different stakeholders in the organization. I think nobody can argue with data. So I think that will definitely help you as well prioritize your different tasks as well. And that's important because you don't have a lot of time. So that way you also have like a very actionable plan of how to go after things. And then last but not least, remember, things change. I know from my marketing plan for the start of the year looks completely different now, but I think the important thing to keep in mind is, if you're looking at your website content holistically and looking at your strategy for it holistically, just pick 1 to 2 key goals for your website over the course of a year. And if you use those 1 to 2 key goals in everything that you do, you'll achieve and be able to build up consistency over time. And that's what will really make a difference for you. Not overnight, but step by step over time. Awesome. The next thing I mentioned for you guys before, website training. Don't assume everyone speaks website lingo. I don't know how many of you, and feel free to share, but how many of you have ended up working on a website by accident because you wanted something to add onto the website? I know that's how it is in a lot of organizations, is that's how you get new content collaborators in. I actually started out at one of my first jobs working on a website redesign and rebuilding it. And one of my roles after we launched the new website was doing monthly training with new content contributors who wanted to gain access to our website. So before they were allowed to get access to our website, they would have to sit through I think it was a 1.5 hour CMS training with me to teach them the basics. And this is also where you can go through things like your standard when it comes to website content quality, website accessibility, and SEO. And I think what happens in a lot of organizations is people take it for granted. Maybe you don't have time to do a training every single month. You know what? Do a recording. Do a recording and a little quiz. It is better than nothing, because I think, yes, we live in a really digital world today, but not everyone is familiar with how to build a website. And so just a little bit of training can go a really long way. Again, bridging to the next point, content guidelines. Like I said, some things are just, a lot of you said you were struggling with the accountability of your content contributors. I think enforcing really strong content guidelines is important, be it your writing style, making sure that, for example, registered trademarks are used, and also just how to publish content. Having a checklist can be incredibly important, just to make sure that they know what to do. There are a lot of things that you need to know before publishing a website. And so whether that is a little video tutorial or a checklist, that can go a long way in terms of setting the bar for new contributors. And then, of course, last but not least, shared website goals and metrics. I know we did a benchmark report in the higher education industry not that long ago. And for me, it was very surprising to see that so many people did not have key performance indicators for their website. And I think as a website manager or a marketing manager, probably you also need to think about what metrics are relevant for me versus what metrics do my content contributors understand. So as a marketing manager, website manager, you're interested in how much traffic you're driving, how well optimized you are from an SEO perspective. But I think for content contributors, you also need to break it down into things that are more tangible for them. For example, number of broken links. So having a shared goal of, we should not have more than 50 broken links on our website this year on average, and sharing that on a month by month basis gets everyone working towards a shared website goal and metric that everyone understands. So I think that's a great way to kind of get everyone engaged. It kind of gamifies it as well. And if you even have different departments working on the website, you can even pit them against each other and say who's going to have the low or the least amount of broken links this month, right? All in fun spirit, of course. All right, so I do want to give you guys a few real life examples because you've been listening to me talk now for the past half an hour. But I did go out and talk to a couple of fellow marketers and communicators just to get their kind of pits and peaks of managing a website. So the first person I talked to, and if any of you joined our webinar last month, you'll know that we had a very in-depth, long conversation, but it is Emily Rojas, who is the communication specialist at Dalton Public Schools. And so her top challenges, like a lot of you, are lack of time and education. She's actually a self-taught website editor, and she is now training other multiple content contributors. So I think that is very realistic. Like I said, a lot of us accidentally fall into managing a website because it falls under the communications or marketing areas, and we don't have formal education in it. And that can, and then it's put on you to go out and educate other people. And some of her top website tips that I thought were really great was she actually works at a school district that has 10 different schools, and each school has a content contributor. And what they do is they incentivize the content contributors on frequency. So for every time they log in to make an edit, they get a little bonus, I think, or contribution towards their little bonus for helping out with their website content tips. So, or they have a matrix around it. So I think that was a really cool and interesting way that I've seen, and kind of helps people or hold those content contributors accountable. So really curious if any of you are also using a similar setup, because I thought that was a really great way to kind of tackle her challenges. The next person I talked to is the head of marketing from a software company called Wepley, and her name was Maggie. And I know this is something that is one of her big challenges was maintaining multi-language websites. And I know if you are in Canada, you need to have both an English and a French website. I know in a lot of places in the United States, we have both English and Spanish versions of websites. And that can be really challenging, maintaining two versions of that website. Some of her other challenges were finding time, like you guys, to do all those optimizations that are low-hanging fruit, and also just sticking to a consistent routine for those ongoing optimizations. Hopefully, or probably some of these things that you also recognize in your day-to-day. I think we've talked about some of those today. It's all just about prioritizing those pieces of content that have high traffic. But some of her top tips actually were to invest in a good web page template or layouts as a base, because again, I know you guys don't have a lot of time. We probably have a lot of content to put out, or you have other content collaborators helping with that. If you have a really good template or layout that already has the H1 structured, the H2, the H3, it has a reminder to tell people to have alt text, that can really help make sure that you have a good website at the end of the day and that the pages are being managed properly. Then, of course, using project management tools like Asana or Monday.com or Trello, there's loads of those, but it helps create visibility on website production tasks. Create an Asana board, invite all of your content contributors, and if you see something on their section of the website that needs to be updated, hold them accountable and create an Asana task for them or a Trello task for them, right? It's totally fine. It's a two-way street. You guys can help each other. And then, of course, creating a checklist. I mentioned this a little bit before, but this was actually one of Maggie's top tips, was create a checklist, because it just makes it that much easier. There are so many things to remember. And if you're not familiar with working on a website, it can feel so overwhelming to try to have to remember all of those things. And the checklist just makes it that much easier to have on your desk or have on your computer when you're going through. Last but not least, we have some great tips from Lynn, who is the digital experience design manager for Minneapolis, the city of Minneapolis. And some of her top challenges, again, I think are things you guys are going to recognize. Having content contributors with a little dedicated time for digital communications. I actually think Emily's suggestion from Dalton Public Schools would help her, where she could incentivize all of them for going in and do some updates. Using consistent communications among all digital channels, I think this is a very important point. All of your different communication channels are official sources of information. So if your social media profile says one thing and your website something else, it's creating a little bit of friction in your communication with your community or your clients. So I think that's a very valid point and something to be aware of. And then, of course, eliminating unapproved or standalone websites, right? Again, you want to make sure that everything is on brand, that you have that you're holding people to your website content style guidelines, and not going quote unquote rogue. So I think that is a very real challenge that I'm sure a lot of people or a lot of you have. Also because everyone's always interested in getting their information up and online and visible for everyone. So it is understandable. So her top tips were create, communicate, and enforce those digital content guidelines. I think that's something we've reiterated quite a lot today. Implement plain language, including accessibility and SEO. I think those are some of the things we mentioned as well. And she also, like many of you before today, have mentioned the Hemingway app. And then she said, develop a team of engaged power users as thought partners and ad hoc trainers. That's an excellent idea. Remember, you don't have to do it all alone. Make sure you create a schedule of who's taking on the different trainings. I know, and I didn't put it on the slide, but Emily from Dalton Public School, she hosted a once a month kind of half an hour Zoom get together where they could exchange tips and tricks on how to manage different areas of the website, and just kind of walk through new features of their content management system, for example. So there are a lot of things that we can do, and it does not need to be all on you as the marketing manager or the website manager. Engage your content contributors as well, because I'm sure there are some that do have experience and are great and can help those who do feel a little bit new. Great. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ashley. And thank you everyone for listening to me and for sharing all of your thoughts and all of your knowledge as well. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jasmine. I know that everything you just shared with us is really fruitful, so we definitely appreciate it. One thing that we do like to offer during these webinars is, here at Monsido, we love to help. So we like to offer our free website scan. What our website scans will do is they will highlight any of the content errors that you have, such as broken links, misspellings, any of those color contrast areas. So number one is, yes, I'd like a free scan of my website. It's a really great thing to take a look at to get a comparison of maybe what you have. And we always have these demos with people or show them the scans, and there's something that they didn't quite catch because we scan for over 160 errors, so very easy to do. Number two would be seeing a demo of Monsido's content quality module. We've gotten so many feedback from our customers that this is one of their favorite parts of the Monsido tool. So feel free to request a demo of that. Number three would be finding out if my website has content quality errors. And in doing so, we can definitely help you there, and we'll have a member of our team reach out to you. And then last but not least would be all of the above, which means that you're really interested in making sure that your content quality is up to date and error free, and we'd certainly love to help with that. So I see that a few of you have already voted. I'll allow a few more to trickle in. We'll give it about 5 more seconds here.
We can also leave it open, Ashley, while you jump through the resources, actually.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Saved by the bell. Thanks, Jasmine.
You're welcome.
And then some of the resources that we'd like to share with you to help you get started. Monsido, we do offer a lot of resources, not only on our website, but also just in general here. So some of our checklists that we offer is the content quality basics. So it's a really good place to start if you're interested in content quality. Accessibility for content creators. So if any of you content creators here on the call and you're looking for a checklist for accessibility, it's a really good asset to use. And then on-page SEO cheat sheet. So a cheat sheet for your SEO, I believe a one-pager to give you some information about all of that. We have Monsido's SEO text editor, which is a really great tool as well that we offer. And then other tools for readability, some of which you guys have already dropped in the chat, so some of you are already aware of, but just to give you, for those of you who don't, or just a reminder here, is the Hemingway app. We also have WordTune and Quillbot, all of which are great tools to use for readability. as well as, the Monsido tool does that as well. Sneak that in. And then we have our web governance handbook, which is, our Monsido's web governance handbook, which will give you tips and tricks for governing your website's content as well as creating an error-free website. So that is a really great one to have. And I'll go ahead and drop that in the chat as well so you guys can have that. And then our upcoming events. I would love to have you guys either join us virtually or let me know if you're going to be attending there. I'd love to see you. I will personally be there at the AMA Symposium for Marketing of Higher Education in National Harbor, Maryland. We'll be there November 6th through the 8th. We'll be at booth 302, so definitely looking forward to seeing some people. If you are going, please stop by the Monsido booth. We'll have some interactive games as well as our team members will be there, happy to answer any questions you may have about web governance. And then we will also be virtually attending the Accessibility Plus event. How do you know you're still accessible? And that is happening on November 15th, where Monsido will be one of the sponsors of the event. So we would love to have you join us. And if you have any questions about any of these events, please feel free to reach out to myself. My email is ash@monsido.com, so feel free to reach out to me there. And then with that, I think we're ready to start our Q&A session. So please post any of your questions via the Zoom panel, but I do know that we received some of the pre-submitted questions. So we'll go ahead and get started here because I do see that time's ticking for our webinar here. So number one is, do you have governance guidelines for content retention, old content that leaks externally, like old news stories, media mentions, etc.? Seems to be the primary source of broken links, not internal links. That's a very good point there.
It's a great point, Nicole, and I totally agree that it isn't always your internal links, but actually a lot of the times external ones. That's my best advice for you is use a broken link checker and make sure you do it periodically, maybe at the start of every month. Just go through and check if there's any broken links. I know if you're a client of ours and you use our tool, we do a weekly scan of your website to send you a report, for example. But that's, of course, a process that can be replicated manually. I think once a week might just be a lot if you're doing it manually. So I would suggest setting a block off half a day, or I know a lot of people like to call it website Wednesdays. So a lot of people will block off like half a day on a Wednesday at the beginning of the month, and they'll have like a whole checklist of things that they'll go through. So they'll scan their website for broken links. They will look to see if there's any new PDFs that need to be uploaded, et cetera, and kind of have a monthly checklist of audit type things that they want to do. So that would be my best piece of advice for that. And then I can actually jump into some of the questions we got, but maybe in the meantime, you can share the link to the Monsido Web Governance Handbook as well as the Accessibility Plus event link in the chat, because I know some people were asking for that. Perfect. So one of the questions that we got beforehand is, I'm just having a look here because I have them on my phone since I'm sharing my screen with all of you guys. The first question is, do you have any templates or checklists that we can use for starting to build a website governance / policy document for organizations? So actually, I would definitely encourage you to check out the Web Governance Handbook that Ashley is sharing right now, as well as when we send out this deck, we have a couple of those checklists that we mentioned on the resource page. That's a really good starting point, I would say, for you to kind of create a policy document for your organization. And then with that, just think about what the requirements are for your organization. I know all industries are different as well. So different things have different value. I know some more regulated industries, you need to have certain information on every page. So putting that into your checklist, for example, could be very helpful as well. The next question that I have here from the pre-submitted ones is, how do you handle text-heavy graphics? For example, our editors like to display an image of a PDF flyer to promote their events. That is a fantastic question. So from a website content perspective, we always encourage there to be as little text and images as possible. And that really falls more under from an accessibility point of view. If you do put, or if your designers do put text or a lot of information into a graphic, I think the most important thing then is that you just add alt text to it. And that's, of course, if it's an image. If it's a PDF flyer, then you actually do need to send it out for remediation, because I think a thing that a lot of people overlook is that as soon as you upload a PDF onto a website, it's technically considered to be website content, and you do need to make sure that also is accessible. So any PDFs that you're uploading to your website, do make sure they're remediated for accessibility. I think that's something that a lot of people are not aware of, and others have processes in place for it, but it's a little bit tedious. All right, I hope that answered your question. So the next question we have is, what is the best practice for starting accessibility improvements with a small or limited development team? Another really great question. The best place to start is you need to do an audit. You need to know where you're at, and you need to know what level of accessibility you need to try to achieve. So my number one recommendation is go out and get an audit to find out where you're at, find out where you need to be. And then another really important thing when it comes to accessibility checks is dividing them up, because some of the checks are technical checks where you do need your website developer to start going through them. And I would say if you need to prioritize those that are on your high traffic pages, and prioritize those, for example, PDFs that are downloaded a lot more from a content point of view. But then your development team can tackle the technical checks. There'll also be design things, so like color contrast, you can give those to your designer to take a look at. And then, of course, there's also content things like making sure there's alternative text. And that's something that you could perhaps, as a website manager, work with your copywriter to try to tackle. So that would be my suggestion, is find out where you need to be at, get an audit, and then divide it up and prioritize the content that's most important. You don't want to have any issues like that on your website or any of your top service pages, right? And then work your way throughout that. And then, of course, you know what? Nobody's perfect. The road to accessibility is long and hard, just like perfecting your website content is. Make sure you just have a really great feedback loop. Make sure you have a way for people to submit feedback, not only for accessibility, but also for website content, right? I saw someone else said in the chat said earlier that they always very gracefully accept feedback on their website, the good and the bad. And I think that's super important. Make sure you just have a feedback loop, because again, you don't need to do it all alone, but just making sure that there is an easy channel for people to reach out to is important. Great. And I'm just I don't see any questions here in the Q&A, so I'll just jump into one more question here from the pre-submitted ones. And it is, how much of this applies to closed intranets for companies and college campuses? A really great question. It's also a form of a website, right? So all of this with website content, it's all best practice, right? So yes, you want to make sure that your externally facing website is following all of these best website content practices. But I think, of course, there's probably a little bit more lenience for internal intranets and stuff like that, where there's a lot more things that are more commonly understood. A good example of that is on a website, it is always best practice to write out abbreviations the first time that they're stated on a page. For example, WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. We always make sure that's written out the first time it's on a web page. If that is commonly accepted terminology or lingo inside your organization, then I don't necessarily think you need to have it. You might just want to have a terminology page that new employees can take a look at. And I'll just answer one quick question before we run out of time, but we will follow up with everyone else. But someone's asking what PDF remediation is. Fantastic question. PDF remediation is the process of making your website, your PDF document accessible. So put some specific tags in the document so that a screen reader and other assistive technology can read what's in the document. So with that, I'll end it and hand it back over to Ashley.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jasmine, for answering those questions at Q&A. And just to reiterate what Jasmine said, if we didn't get to any of your questions, we will make sure to include them, as well as all of those great resources that we shared with you today. We will make sure to include the links in one of the follow-up emails that we send you. We just want to give you guys a huge thanks for joining today. For some of the first timers, we hope to see you again at some of our next webinars. And for you faithful webinar joiners, thank you so much for joining us here today. I know myself and Jasmine always enjoy being able to get together and share ideas around websites with you all. So hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will be following up with you guys all soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.